Hello, today I'm going to look at the penetrating vessel and its role in regulating cycles of blood, especially in women. It's much more obvious in women, but it does have its cycles in men. If you don't know anything about the penetrating vessel, I suggest you watch another video that I've made on its pathway and what it's about and how it develops in our body when we're in the womb and in our early years. So that you can find a link to in the description down below. So the penetrating vessel is known as the sea of blood. And blood, I talked in my previous video about how I first discovered the penetrating vessel when working with pregnant women, because in pregnancy women have the greatest volume of blood in their body than at any other time in their life, because they need all this extra blood to nourish their baby, which I described also in the previous video. And we have about 30 to 40% more circulating blood by the end of the pregnancy. But our blood, that's the time when it's fullest, but our blood has other cycles, and I want to talk about those a little bit today. I'm going to talk primarily about women because it's more obvious in women. But if you're a man who's listening, first of all, it's interesting to know these changes for the women in your life, but also maybe you're aware of how your blood changes, and I will talk about that a little bit more after I've talked about women. So the first big blood changes for women are at the time of puberty. And in the ancient Chinese texts, they talk about how with our first period, but of course the first period doesn't emerge out of nowhere, so there are changes that are going on within the body, within the hormonal system, within all systems in the body. But in terms of the penetrating vessel, there are changes going on before we have our first period. But they say that the first bleeding shows that the penetrating vessel has reached a certain stage of its development. It's become strong enough that we now have the capacity to give our energy to support somebody else. Although it's just the beginning of that. So if we have our first period when we're only 11 or 12, clearly we still have a lot of growing to do ourselves, and so ideally we don't want to become pregnant, because if we gave some of our blood to another, then we wouldn't grow ourselves properly. So it's just the first stage of preparing the body for pregnancy. I think it's really important to be aware of that. It doesn't mean it's a good time to be pregnant, and the Chinese wouldn't have felt that either. It's showing a certain phase of maturation of the penetrating vessel, of the Chong Mai, that now that there's a more flowing. So in these early years of our life, before we start bleeding, we need all the energy of the penetrating vessel for ourselves. If you remember the affirmation that I gave you, I create a nourishing relationship with myself. It's also a relationship about how we nourish ourselves, how in order to grow physically as well as emotionally. And in the first 12 years or so of our life, or 11, 12, until we menstruate, we're doing a lot of growing. And we need the blood, we need the penetrating vessel, so we can make the bones and the muscles, and our heart can grow, and we can grow emotionally as well. All of these things are related to the penetrating vessel. The Chinese also talk about cycles of flow of the essence, which is it's the essence, it's changes in the essence as well as the blood, the essence being quite linked in a way to hormonal energy, but it's much more than that. It's our ancestral energy, it's the energy of the kidneys, it's another nutritive kind of energy. But we have cycles which are 7 years for women and 8 years for men. And so we see it's towards the end of the second cycle that we start to bleed, showing a change in the penetrating vessel. But that's not meaning that we're ready to become pregnant. From the ancient Chinese, they'd say probably towards the end of the third cycle, so around age 21. We've pretty much completed our own growing, so we've used the penetrating vessel to support ourselves, and then we've now got some other energy that we can use to support the growth of another being. And so that's the changes of pregnancy, which I'll talk about in a moment. So some of the symptoms of the changes that happen in puberty, changes in our relationships to other people, changes in our basic identity. For girls, changes in our breasts, which are important areas in the penetrating vessel. Changes in our hips and our pelvis, also important areas. Changes also in our legs and the whole development of our body and our presence. I'm not going to go into too much detail here because I'm really focusing on the penetrating vessel. But in the previous video I talked a bit about the imbalances of weakness in the kidneys or lack of grounding, which cause the penetrating vessel to rise up. That's the main imbalance. And this often happens in puberty. I know for me, one of the main symptoms of puberty was flushing red a lot. And this is a typical sign of the penetrating vessel, which is having to find another flow. The cycles of blood are really changes in the flow of not just the penetrating vessel, but I'm specifically focusing on the penetrating vessel today. The penetrating vessel, instead of just flowing inside our own body, now is building each month. So, and you can look at my videos on the menstrual cycle for that. I can also put those in the links down below. But also it's coming out of our body through the blood. Menstrual blood is seen as a bit different from the rest of blood in our body. It's like a heavenly expression of the blood, the lining of the womb, but it's still linked with the penetrating vessel, which regulates all blood, and it needs to come out. What helps it come out is a lot the girdle vessel, which I can talk about in another video. But we lose blood, and then that means after we've bled, we're likely to feel a little bit weaker, maybe for a few hours, maybe for a day or two, maybe for longer. And again, in the menstrual cycle, I talk about that, how after bleeding, we are slightly depleted relative to how we were before. So certainly in these adolescent puberty years, it's really important to support our growth and to support our capacity if we do want to conceive and give birth to another life, that we have nourishing relationships and also that we have nourishing food and hopefully a safe space on earth. All of these things help to nourish the penetrating vessel, and we'll see that with other phases. So at a certain point we may conceive. Well, first of all, before I get on to conception, then our body gets used to this cycle of 28 roughly on average day flow of the blood leaving the body, and then we build it up. And again, in the other videos on the menstrual cycle, I talk about, obviously in the ancient China, they didn't have contraceptive pills and hormonal treatments. And these seem to be, from what we've observed in modern times, depleting the blood. And it's something extra for the body to digest. It can be a bit confusing for the body, and also we're of course suppressing fertility, so the energies of the penetrating vessel aren't flowing in the way that they normally would. I wonder if perhaps this could be related to things like potentially endometriosis, polycystic ovaries, and also our capacity to conceive. They're just speculations, but it's worth thinking, as soon as we start changing the body's natural flow, then what other things are we setting up? We don't really know. So I'm going to talk more about the natural cycle, because otherwise it can be suppositions. But if we conceive, then our body, the penetrating vessel, changes its flow again, because now it needs to, the Chinese explain the increase in the blood volume in pregnancy is caused because we're not losing the energy of the penetrating vessel each month through our period, and so that energy, which is the physical blood, but it's also essence, it's also an energy, it stays in our body. And so each month that passes, we get more of this energy because we're keeping it for ourselves. Because sometimes people talk about how pregnancy can be depleting and draining of our energy. Not necessarily. If our energy is strong at the beginning, it's not depleting. It is actually what our body is designed to do, to have the capacity. Part of our energy is there to be able to reproduce. So the penetrating vessel is there to support us to reproduce. So the Chinese say it's natural that we don't then bleed, because then we build up the energy in our body, and it's that nourishes the baby. Along with, of course, the fact that not only are we not building up and then losing blood each month, but we use energy in order to mature the eggs. 10 to 15 eggs, 5 to 15 eggs, only one reaches full maturation, but that takes energy as well. And so all these things stop, and so we have this extra energy in our body, and that nourishes the baby. But it takes the body a bit of time to get used to this new change of energy. And also it's the placenta, which I talk about in the previous video on the penetrating vessel, the placenta, which is made of the baby's cells, but the placenta helps to stabilize. We know from a Western point of view it helps to stabilize the hormones, but it also helps to stabilize and contain the blood flowing between the mother and the baby. So it creates a kind of anchoring, and it tends to calm the kidneys and give us more energy in the legs and the lower back. And so morning sickness usually tends to stop around the end of the first trimester, which is when the placenta is more fully functioning, and we can see the placenta as an expression of penetrating vessel energy. I think that's quite interesting. And if women still have this rising up of energy after the first trimester, it indicates more a deeper weakness in the kidneys or a deeper lack of anchoring in the legs. Yes, emotional rising up as well. The first trimester of pregnancy is quite an emotionally challenging time, whether or not we wanted to become pregnant. It raises all feelings about, am I good enough to be the mother? Can I care for this baby? Is it the right time in my life? Have I got enough money? Is my relationship with my partner good? All these things rising up. There's lots of change for the mother. This is change in the penetrating vessel. It shows all the emotions linked with the penetrating vessel. And again, to ground, to connect with the earth, all of this will help. And to get enough rest. That's a big thing I find, especially in the first trimester of pregnancy. A lot of women don't take enough rest. They don't appreciate how much energy their body is needing for these first 3 months of the pregnancy. That's when all the baby's main systems are forming. That's when the baby's becoming a fetus. Afterwards, it's mostly maturing systems and putting on weight. But the most important things happen of the development of all the organs happens in the first trimester of pregnancy, and it needs a lot of our body's energy, so we really need to rest. I find a lot when I work with women in the first trimester with the penetrating vessel, somehow it enables them to feel this, and then they accept the need to slow down and rest and anchor. Nourishing foods can be a bit challenging because sometimes women don't feel like eating a lot or not necessarily nourishing foods, but as long as we've had nourishing foods before pregnancy, then that hopefully can tide us over these first few months. So in essence, those are the changes, the most changes that happen in the penetrating vessel are in the first trimester. After that, the body is more settled and the volume increases, but the body's got used to this change of flow, and we do need to make sure that we get enough rest and good nourishment through the rest of our pregnancy as well, in order to prepare for birth. Because at birth then there's a big shift, of course, for the baby, but also for the mother, because the placenta comes out of her body as well as the baby, and most of this extra blood was flowing in her body to nourish the placenta and the baby, and then it's out of the body. And so how she feels after birth can be quite out of her body, because she was so connected with her baby through her heart, but also through her womb, and then her baby's not inside her body, her baby's outside her body, and so she's energetically, there's a part of her that isn't at home in her body, which is an important aspect of the penetrating vessel. And in fact, one of the best ways for her to support herself after birth, apart from rest and nourishment and building up her blood again, is to hold her baby against her body. Whether or not she's breastfeeding, just the act of holding her baby against her body helps to bring these energetic qualities of the blood back into her body, and she tends to settle more, which is interesting because often, or there've been times in history when women were told, oh, put your baby in another room so you can have time to have a rest. But if the baby's not with the mother's kind of searching for her baby, even if she's not aware of it consciously. Her body's wanting the baby, to feel the baby, because it's a big change to have a baby inside and then the baby outside. And so in most traditional cultures, including ancient China and Japan, the mother were being supported so that she could be with her baby for most of the first year, but certainly the first few months, because firstly that helps to slow her down, but it helps to bring her connection back into her body. So the baby, interestingly, we often think the mother is nourishing, giving to her baby, but not receiving. But it's a mutual relationship. She receives from her baby, she can hold her baby and rest, and that helps nourish. She's nourishing her baby with her penetrating vessel, and her baby is nourishing her. And so postnatally, the ancient Chinese said it's really, really important to make sure that we fully nourish our penetrating vessel, a lot through connecting with our baby, a lot through rest and nourishment of ourselves, to build it back up again. Because if we don't build our blood back up again, they say it actually creates a weakness for the rest of our life. And I think that's probably true. These days women tend to have a lot fewer children than women had in the past, but they're often more tired. They might have had fertility treatments, they have them close together, they're tired, and so they need more time rather than less time to rest. And then if there's tiredness, it's going to influence the menopause, which is the next phase in the changes of blood for women in the penetrating vessel. And so if the postnatal period and how we were in pregnancy influences the menopause, and so I also don't think it's surprising that so many women are experiencing difficulties in the menopause, because essentially all the symptoms of the menopause that we hear about, hot flushes, emotional depressions, rising anxiety, lack of sleep, all of this is showing a weakness in the penetrating vessel, in the level of the kidneys, and also in a lack of anchoring, a lack of nourishment. So what is happening to the penetrating vessel during the menopause? Well, as we know, the menopause is the ending of the cycle, of menstrual cycle. I actually like to call the menopause maturescence. One of my students came up with this name. It's a maturing of our essence. It's a natural phase in our lives, and it's when I like to think of it, and again one of my students gave me this as the image, we're halfway through our lives. According to ancient Chinese, they saw the natural span of our lives as 100 years, and that we could live well till we were 100, but obviously we have to adapt to our changing body, and we're not going to be doing the same things when we're 100 that we were doing when we were 50 or before. And so for women, we could see this blood, this energy of nourishment. We need it for ourselves. Because pregnancy and the postnatal period, nourishing a baby, takes a lot of our energy. And a certain phase in our life, halfway through, our body needs to switch. It needs to stop that cycle so that now we can give the energy to ourselves. And this is what one of my students said. In a way, we become the baby. We become the being that needs that nourishment. We need to love and nourish and focus our energy more on ourselves. So if we've have had children, hopefully they're old enough that we have time to focus more on ourselves. That isn't always the case these days, because women are having their children when they're much older than in the past. But we need to make sure that we're giving ourselves a lot more time and putting ourselves more at the centre. So the penetrating vessel now needs to make a change, a bit like it did in pregnancy in a way, except this time the blood is going to support us. And so a lot of the symptoms of the menopause rising up are similar to the first trimester of pregnancy, because it's a time it's not necessarily easy to make that shift to loving and nurturing ourselves instead of giving a lot of our energy to others. And I think that's part of what is going on. I'm going to make some videos in much more detail on each of these phases of life: pregnancy, the postnatal period, and the menopause. But I just think it's nice to have a feel of the overview of all the changes, and actually how it's a continuum. And indeed, in the videos on the menstrual cycle, I make the link to pregnancy, birth, and postnatal. Our body is wise. Our body is set up to do the different things that it needs to do. And again, for the menopause, if we have hot flushes and rising up and exhaustion and all the symptoms, then it is showing that there is an imbalance in the penetrating vessel, which we need to address. For me, it was interesting. I had all the hot flushes and everything, and I used to faint and all of that during puberty. But the menopause, I didn't have any hot flushes. I think because I'd spent my life working with shiatsu and understanding patterns, ancestral patterns, and learning how to nourish myself. So that's a brief tour through the different changes of flow of blood, to say that basically then this blood, the penetrating vessel, now needs to nourish us for the second half of our life, for 50 years of our lifetime. And A similar thing does happen with men, but it's not so obvious, is it? But clearly, as a man goes through his life, in his earlier years, he has more energy. He also, if he has children, is giving a lot of his energy to children. The quality of his sperm affects the nature of the pregnancy and the energy that he's giving to his baby, the energetic DNA. And as he gets older, the quality of his sperm declines. The maturation of the sperm is kind of like the equivalent of the maturation of the egg. Obviously, men don't bleed. The male connection is, or the male expression of the penetrating vessel is sperm. And so ejaculation, a man is using his essence more through ejaculation than through blood, but it's still an expression. It's still, to have healthy sperm, a man needs to be well nourished. And so a man, it's very much related to fertility for men. And again, for men, halfway through their life, they don't have such a big shift, but after about, the cycles for men are longer, they're 8 years. So if for women it's 49, for men it's about 54. So it's a little bit later on. Their energy can start to decline. They also need to start looking after themselves. All the things I've said for women are still applicable for men. Learning to take more care of themselves, giving less out to other people. They have more limited energy. They need to be the baby in a way and nourish themselves. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a flavour of the changes, because now I'm going to read the resources, and hopefully you'll understand the resources. And before I read the resources, I'm just going to say what happens if the penetrating vessel has too much energy. It's unusual it has too much. It's more that it's a bit overactive. But we can see patterns where you can see it's, I'll read the overactive patterns. I'm overly anchored to the earth. I feel stuck and I can't move. There's a fullness in my chest. My heart is heavy and can't open. I may have issues digesting food or emotions. I tend to overeat and surround myself with lots of possessions. I'm overly attached to material comfort or to my mother. I don't like being away from home. And for women, it would be expressed through particularly long and heavy periods. It's a sort of overactive and a sluggish, a heavy. The underactive, more of a sort of weakness pattern. I have lost my connection to earth and my trust in life. I easily scatter and my energy rises quickly up my body, escaping through my heart and causing me to feel sick and lost. I belong nowhere. I tend to skip meals and I don't have a good appetite. My fridge is often empty. I see the lack in life. I feel I don't have enough for myself or to share. I often feel empty. I find it hard to be affectionate with others. I dislike giving or receiving touch. I have short or infrequent periods. I have little or no contact with my mother. I don't feel safe in my home. It's a bit of an oversimplification. We often have we can have a mixture of the overactive and the underactive at different times in our life or different times in our menstrual cycle. But it just gives a bit of a feel for some of those things that I was talking about. So I want to finish this video with connecting you with your resources of the penetrating vessel. So, my resources. I am Mother Earth. Chinese medicine sees us as the microcosm of the universe, which is the macrocosm. So I've talked about as a mother being the first earth for a baby, but we are Mother Earth, and this applies to men as well as women. I am Mother Earth. I invite you to be your own creation. I am the sap of the tree, flowing through the whole tree to nourish it all, from the roots, through the trunk, to the branches and leaves. I am the trunk, the roots, the branches and leaves. I am the mother. I am the mother within you. I bond you to Mother Earth through your legs and your roots. I nourish you through my heart and my breasts. I hold you against my body and create safety and rest. I feel at home in my body and in my place on earth and in myself. I am the blood which flows in every cell of your body, nourishing you physically and emotionally. I am the bloodline connecting you to your ancestors. I am your menstrual blood and the milk which flows from your breasts. I form a crossroad in your body at the level of your heart. I open out through your arms to the center of your palm so you can connect with others. I reach down through the center of your body and form a crossroads at your pelvis. I move down through your legs to the earth. I reach up from my heart to the sky. I am a long dress skirting the earth and fastening at your heart. I am the rich and inner lining of your cloak. I am the crossroads on your journey through life, where you can open your heart to others you meet. I hope you enjoyed sharing this time with me and the powerful penetrating vessel Chongmai of Chinese medicine. If you have any questions, anything that's not clear, any comments, any sharings, please do feel free to share them. It all helps spread the word and get more people watching these videos. Thank you so much for your time.